Everyone to the program today. And we have a very, very special speaker with us today. Uh, I'll quickly introduce, and then after that we can unmute and welcome Prabhuji with a loud Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So today's speaker is His Grace Anuttama Prabhuji. Anuttama Prabhuji joined ISKCON in 1971 in Washington, D.C. when he was only 16 years old. He moved into the temple and he finished his senior year in high school. You won't believe it, but wearing a dhoti and shaved head. He served at the Brooklyn Temple from 1972 to 1975, and thereafter served for a year each from 1976 to 1980 at various places, including at the Gitanagari farm in Pennsylvania, the Radha Damodar bus party, traveling all over the US and preaching in Beirut. And then also he went to Beirut and Cairo in Egypt. And he also served at the Juhu ISKCON in Mumbai, and then also served in Mauritius. Prabhuji got married in ISKCON Juhu in Mumbai in 1980, and then moved out of the temple in later in 1980, and started his own business. And now him and his wife they've had 2 children and 4 grandchildren. And Prabhuji, many times when I reached out to Prabhuji, I thought it was Anuttama Prabhuji, the GBC. Prabhuji, his daughter is married to Gauravani Prabhu. Many of you all know Gauravani Prabhu in our movement, the famous singer. So we're very happy that Prabhuji is with us today, and is going to speak on a very, very wonderful topic, the symptoms of Kali-Yuga, which we are in right now. So at this moment, if you all can unmute yourself and loudly chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and welcome Prabhuji to today's talk.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
Krishna,
Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare Rama,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Rama Rama,
Hare
Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. I'll hand it over to Anuttama Prabhuji.
Let's see, can you hear me now?
Very well.
Now you can. Yes, thank you. Yes, unusual topic, Age of Kali. Usually we like to hear Krishna pastimes, something from Bhagavad Gita, but this is the age we're in. So, and the Bhagavatam describes very clearly the symptoms of the age of Kali. So, Namayam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shmate Bhaktivedanta Swaminityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Navishesha Sunyavadi Paschachadi Satarane. So when I was looking this verse up, there's a publication of all the lectures of Prabhupada. And I see that Prabhupada only gave one lecture from the 12th canto back in March of 1968, which is in San Francisco. So if you know the history of Prabhupada's early days, he started in New York in 1966, and San Francisco was the second place he went to. And at that time, there were Mukunda Maharaj, who wasn't Maharaj then, him and some of his friends had gone over to San Francisco and started a temple there. So it was just a handful of newer devotees, and of course the San Francisco area was blooming with the summer of love. Many young people were there, and it was, shall we say, a happening place. So it was a great opportunity for Prabhupada to meet the young people of the summer of love, or we would say the young people of the age of Kali, either way. So Prabhupada gave this lecture, which was quite a detailed lecture, considering his audience was such a neophyte group of people with no background at all in Hindu culture, Indian culture, Bhagavad Gita, or Krishna. And he actually starts with the first verse, and he goes on for the first 4 verses going through it. So I'll read the first verse for you. I have several books here. I have the Bhagavatam itself. I have Prabhupada's written lecture. And I also have the Bhagavad Gita, which I want to also read a little bit from. So, Sri Sukha Uvacha Tataschanu Dina Dharma Satyam Socham Kshamadaya Kalena Balena Rajan Nashat Yahur Balam Smriti. The word for word is Sri Sukha Uvacha, Sukadev Goswami said, Tata, then, Cha, and Anu Dinam, day after day, Dharma, religion, Satyam, truth, Socham, cleanliness, Shama, tolerance, also forgiveness, Daya, mercy, Kalena, by the force of time, Balena, strong, Rajan, O King Parikshit, Nasyati, will become ruined, Ayur, duration of life, Balam, strength, and Smriti, memory. The translation is, Sukadev Goswami said, then, O King, religion, truthfulness, cleanliness, tolerance, mercy, duration of life, physical strength, and memory will all diminish day by day because of the powerful influence of the age of Kali. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Prabhupada begins his talk here. I'm going to try to follow as much as I can what Prabhupada said. That way it's always the best. So Prabhupada starts off, he says, today we shall discuss about the prominent symptoms of this age, the age of Kali. And then he goes on for a couple of paragraphs explaining how Srimad Bhagavatam was not written. It is Vedic literature that was recorded from hearing from teacher to student 5,000 years before. So we all know the age of Kali begins as soon as Lord Krishna leaves the world. There's a chapter in Srimad Bhagavatam, earlier chapter, the entrance of the age of Kali and how Parikshit meets Kali personified. So that's another story. Right now we're discussing the qualities of this age. So Prabhupada goes on here to explain how the sages were Trikalagya. Trikalagya means they know the past, the present, and the future, because the book is written, Bhagavatam is written 5,000 years ago, or compiled by Vyasadeva. Ganesh is the scribe. 5,000 years ago. So that's before or just at the beginning of the age of Kali. So all this futuristic descriptions that they give here is their being able to perceive the future with spiritual vision. So there's 8 items that are mentioned in this verse. So dharma is the first one, religiosity. So all of these things are diminished day by day. It describes, the word is dinam. Dinam means day by day, that things are gradually diminished. So we have entered 5,000 years of Kali-Yuga, and Kali-Yuga lasts for 432,000 years. So it's a long way to go. So Prabhupada, in his conversation, he discusses the 4 yuga cycles, which is important to understand how time works throughout the universe and how everything is working through the agent of time. So Satya Yuga is the first age. Satya Yuga, people had all good qualities and their life was very long. 100,000 years was the average life expectancy in such a yuga. Treta Yuga, things are diminished 10 times. The life expectancy is diminished 10 times, so 10,000 year life expectancy. Dwapara Yuga, life expectancy again reduced 10 times to 1,000 years. And Kali-Yuga, again 10 times to at the most 100 years, and gradually reducing down and down as time goes on. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks a little bit about time and these ages. So in the 8th chapter, text 17, he says, by human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. So in the purport here, Prabhupada explains that the duration of the material universe is limited. It is manifested in cycles of kalpas. A kalpa is a day of Brahma, and one day of Brahma consists of 1,000 cycles of 4 yugas or ages. So that's the day, that's 12 hours. That's half a day, because there's day and night. So there's 1,000 cycles in the day of 12 hours, and there's 1,000 cycles of his night. And each, one cycle is of the 4 yugas. So there's 1,000 times the 4. So he begins to give some math on this. He says, the cycle of such is characterized by virtue, wisdom, and religion. There is practically no ignorance and vice. And the yuga lasts 1,728,000 years. So in Treta Yuga, when it is introduced, the yuga lasts for 1,296,000 years. In Dwapara Yuga, there is an even greater decline in virtue and religion. Vice is increasing, and the yuga lasts 864,000 years. And finally, Kali-Yuga, there is an abundance of strife, ignorance, irreligion, and vice. True virtue being practically non-existent. And the Kali-Yuga lasts for 432,000 years. So Prabhupada's giving here the time periods of each of these cycles. And then he describes, so that's just one cycle. There's 1,000 of these cycles to make half a day of Brahma. So he continues on here that these 4 yugas rotate in 1,000 times, comprising one day of Brahma, and the same number comprises one night. Brahma lives 100 of such years and then dies. These 100 years, by Earth calculation, total 311 trillion and 40 billion Earth years. So obviously beyond our capacity. By these calculations, the life of Brahma seems fantastic, but from the viewpoint of eternity, it is as brief as a flashing light. So in the causal ocean, there are innumerable Brahmas rising and appearing like bubbles in the Atlantic Ocean. Brahma and his creation are all part of the material universe, and therefore they are in constant flux. So Prabhupada, he sums it up by saying it's all just a flash. It's like a flash of light, these 311 trillion, 40 billion years. You know, we're thinking if I get to live to be 90 years old, I'll be successful. But, you know, we think that's old age. But the life of Lord Brahma is the life of the universe. And when he dies, that is the end of the universe. So he continues here, in the material universe, not even Brahma is free from the process of birth, death, old age, and disease. Brahma, however, is directly engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord in the management of this universe. Therefore, he at once attains liberation. So upon Brahma's death, he attains liberation. So Brahmaloka, which is the highest planet in the material universe, and which survives all the heavenly planets in the upper stratus of the planetary systems. But in due course, Brahma and all the inhabitants of Brahmaloka are subject to death according to the laws of nature. So even Lord Brahma dies. And his life is, which is the 311 trillion 40 billion years. So then the next verse of the Bhagavad Gita, text 19, it continues on with some idea. He said, Krishna says, the verse is, again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are helplessly annihilated. So this is an interesting point that we, unless you read these verses recently, you wouldn't necessarily understand. So in the purport, Prabhupada says here that the less intelligent who try to remain within this material world may be elevated to higher planets and then must come down to this earth planet. During the daytime of Brahma, they can exhibit their activities on higher or lower planets within the material world. But at the coming of Brahma's night, they are all annihilated. So what this means is during Brahma's daytime, we're active within this world. Life after life after life after life, thousands, millions of lives. Up and down, higher planets, lower planets, worms, dogs, demigods, so many species. 8,400,000 species of life. Prabhupada always makes that point, that there's that many species throughout the universe. And we wander throughout all of them. But when Brahma's night comes, we're all annihilated. And for that whole, again, 1,000 yuga cycle, that whole time period, we are packed up within the body of Lord Vishnu. We are unmanifested in our activities within this world. So we have a long time of being unmanifested. So it says here, then again, they are manifested at the arrival of Brahma's day. Bhutva bhutva praliyate. During the day, they become manifested, and at night, they are annihilated again. Ultimately, when Brahma's life is finished, they are all annihilated and remain unmanifested for millions and millions of years. And when Brahma is born again in another millennium, they are again manifested. In this way, they are captivated by the spell of the material world. So, during Brahma's day, we're manifested, we're enjoying the material world and suffering in the material world for a long time. At Brahma's night, we're unmanifested, and then again manifested in Brahma's day. And when Brahma dies, according to this purport, we are unmanifested again for millions and millions of years until Brahma is born again in another millennium, and then we are again remanifested. So we have a lot of time being unmanifested while we're in this material world. This is all within the material world. Within the spiritual world, these things there is no time. We always say there's no time in the spiritual world. There's no influence of time. But in this world, time is the main factor. Krishna says, in fact, that I am time. Time I am, destroyer of the worlds, in the 11th chapter. So just wanted to give you some of those points on how long these cycles are. So these eight items are diminishing day by day by the time. Dharma, religiosity; satyam, truthfulness. We all know the opposite of truthfulness is speaking lies. So Prabhupada describes in his lecture, we begin to lie. Lie is common. Socham, cleanliness. This is an important point, cleanliness. And Prabhupada even says in his lecture, cleanliness is next to godliness. Common saying, but Prabhupada also quotes it. And he says that in India, for cultured people, higher caste people, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, taking bath 2 to 3 times a day is not uncommon. So, but then he talks also about there's 2 kinds of cleanliness. There's external cleanliness, which Prabhupada always emphasized, that we bathe and we wash our clothes, we brush our teeth. He also advised that we keep clean shaven. Prabhupada, if you look at an old picture of Prabhupada, you see there's an advertisement for one of his products. He was a pharmacist, and he had his own health products, and he would have his picture on the can of the health products, and he has a mustache. So one disciple asked Prabhupada once, he said, well, you know, Prabhupada, you tell us not to have mustaches and not to have beards, but you have a mustache in this old picture. Prabhupada said, that's before I was initiated. He said, after I was initiated, I was always clean shaven. So Prabhupada always encouraged us to be clean shaven. Specifically in the West, well, all over India, even India, there was one time in South India where they were going to install deities. I think it was maybe Hyderabad. And some of the leading American sannyasis and devotees who were there were doing Chaturmasya. So when you do Chaturmasya, one of the items is you don't shave for 4 months. So, you know, obviously you start some beard growing. So Prabhupada saw this and he said, you know, why are you all growing beards? Oh, we're doing Chaturmasya, Prabhupada. He says, this is a very important ceremony we're having, installing the deity. You must be clean looking. I want you all to shave your faces. Even though they were doing an authorized vrata, Chaturmasya, Prabhupada said, no, you shave your face. We want to look clean for the ceremony. So Prabhupada encouraged all his disciples also not to have long hair. Keep clean, either shaven or short gentleman hair. So cleanliness, inside and out. So inside is, we didn't talk about that. Inside is by Cheto Darpana Marjanam, by cleansing our heart, by cleansing our mind through chanting of the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna mantra, by reading scriptures, Madmana Bhavad Mad Bhakto, Madjaji Mam Namaskaru, by thinking of Krishna always. There was one scholar, Sanskrit scholar, came to Prabhupada in Hyderabad. And he said, Prabhupada, I want to teach your disciples Sanskrit and all of the details of the pujas and all these things. And Prabhupada said to him, these Western boys, they're not very suited for that. He says, we are working on the principle of Manmana Bhavad Mad Bhakto. He said, I present this as the easy process for self-realization. Just think of me or think of Krishna, become my devotee, surrender to me. This is what Krishna asks. He says, this is what I've been teaching from the beginning when I came to the Western countries. I did not come to teach them Sanskrit. I did not come to teach them details of, there's so many details in Vedic culture. He said, these are simple boys and girls. I've just presented very simple, keep it simple, and they understand it. So I appreciate your offer, but no thank you. So Prabhupada sent him on his way. I remember that. So cleanliness, then shama, forgiveness or tolerance. Now in here, Prabhupada talks a lot about that. Forgiveness. He says, says we should not take everything so seriously, then it is very difficult to live. So shama, but that shama means forgiveness. Nobody will forgive. We're always, even in our own relationships with each other, we don't forgive. Retaliation, vengeance, that will increase. So these 4 items, religiousness, truthfulness, cleanliness, and forgiveness. And then he said, the next one, daya. Daya means mercy. So here he describes a little more detail. He says, so who are we merciful to? What is the idea of mercy? So he says that we are merciful to the less strong, like the animals, the birds, the beasts. You should be very merciful. Like for the children, you should be merciful to children. According to Vedic injunction, children, women, brahmanas, old men, and cows should be always protected. So Prabhupada goes on and explains these things. That, of course, we have this prayer. Prabhupada introduced this prayer very early on. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagadataya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. that I offer my respects to the brahmanas and to the cows. So we respect these personalities, and also we are merciful to them. So he says that we should always show mercy. They require protection, especially these 5 items have been enjoined that they should be given protection. That is required in human civilization. Cow protection is very important. Woman's protection is very important. Brahmana's protection is very important. Children's protection is very important. And then Prabhupada puts a little side note in here. He says, of course, nowadays there is protection for children by the government, by the state. If there's some child abuse, you call up the county and they'll come and check it out. But then he says, but this is also artificial. There is killing process also. So many children in the womb are killed. But according to Vedic civilization, that is the greatest offense. So he's putting that side there. On one side, the government is, offering protection to children, but on the other side, they've legalized the killing of children in the womb. So daya means that you should show your mercifulness toward those who are weak. And in this age of Kali, this will reduce, and our duration of life will reduce. And then he goes on describing in such a yuga was 100,000 years. Treta was 10,000, Dwarpa was 1,000, and Kali is 100. So that is also greatly reducing in this age. And then we're down to the last few is, he says, Smriti means memory. So out of these, they will all gradually reduce. And then he says here, and we have already experienced Smriti, meaning reducefulness of memory. As one gets older, one's memory naturally reduces. And in the age of Kali, everyone's memory is reducing. And he describes that previous to Kali-Yuga, that the students would hear from the guru and they would memorize it. There was no written books. It wasn't until Vyasadeva came and compiled. He didn't make up, the Vedas were already there. He just compiled it all because he knew that in the age of Kali, people will need books to remember these things. So he had it all written down. So those are the 8 items that diminish: religiosity, truthfulness, cleanliness, forgiveness, mercifulness, duration of life, strength, and memory. So then he goes on in his talk, he goes to the next verse, which I'll read to you here, which is text 2. He says, in Kali-Yuga, wealth alone will be considered the sign of a man's good birth, proper behavior and fine qualities, and law and justice will be applied only on the basis of one's power. So Prabhupada goes on to explain that formerly a man was respectable by his birth in a respectable family and by his behavior, just like a brahmana. A brahmana was respected because his behavior was so nice. He was truthful, he was clean, he was a man of knowledge, and he was faithful in scripture, and so many qualifications. Therefore, he was respected. So here it is said that janma, birth in a good family or high family, or good behavior, janma and guna, qualities. Supposedly a man is great philosopher, a great learned scholar. That is very good qualifications. So these things will not be considered. These things will not be considered in this age. So what is considered? He says, if he has got all bad qualities, but he has got money, he is respected. Man can have all bad qualities, but he is respected if he has money. And we see that. He says here that in every religion, in every scripture, there are many things you must do. Oh, the dharma is diminished. In every scripture, there is the idea of religious duties and activities. So all of these things are diminished in this age of Kali. It says might is right, because it says here in the verse that on the basis of one's power, So Prabhupada says might is right. If you have might, if you have military, then you're in charge. Otherwise, no one cares for you. And then he goes on to the next verse, the third one, which I'll read you. Keep in mind that he's talking in San Francisco in 1968 and it's interesting to remember what hippie people are like. Prabhupada was basically, his early audience was the hippies, young people who had left home and were basically not following any principles. But somehow or other, they came in contact with the pure devotee and received Krishna's mercy. And some of them became devotees and joined his movement and assisted him. And that's what we talk about in this third verse here. It says, the verse is, men and women will live together merely because of superficial attraction, and success in business will depend on deceit. Womanliness and manliness will be judged according to one's expertise in sex, and a man will be known as a brahmana just by his wearing a thread. So this is more description of the age of Kali. And in his discussion here, Prabhupada talks about how in Vedic culture, that the marriage ceremony, the marriage process is a lengthy process, that the astrologers, the astrology is taken, the charts are compared to see if they're going to be compatible. The families make the arrangements. He says here, not that the boy and girl just say, oh, I like you, you look pretty, let's get married. He said, no, there's a big process. He says they calculate, and the parents would see in what kind of family the girl is and what kind of boy the family he is born. So many things. And if they do not agree, the parents of the girl and the boy, then there is no marriage. Still in India, at least, he said, I was also married, and some of my children, they were also married. But this system in India is still followed. The parents will select a suitable boy and a suitable girl. He's discussing this to people that have no idea about, they don't even believe in marriage. These young people in San Francisco and all over the Western world, particularly in this period, marriage was like not done. You just lived with your partner and the marriage was not even considered. But Prabhupada's explaining what is Vedic culture to these people. He said the primary aim is that they may live very peacefully, that there is no unnecessary disturbance in their family life. This was the aim. But in the Kali-Yuga, it is said, Gam Patye, selection of husband and wife will depend on agreement, that's all. I like you, you like me, that's all, finished. That's what I like you, you like me, finished. Good enough, let's move in together. And suppose the parents do not like that will be taken, the girl likes, so that is it, that's all. So he's saying that if the girl likes, it's not our decision. And that's what goes on in the West. But according to Vedic culture, that's not the way it's done. And Vyasadeva is explaining here, Sukadev is explaining, men and women will live together merely because of superficial attraction. And so what happens when there's superficial attraction? Ultimately, you become unattracted at some point because there's no deep responsibility there. So Prabhupada says here, there was no question of divorce. There was no question of divorce. Even they do not like each other. Even they fight. Fight there must be whenever there are man and woman. It is natural. That is individuality. Therefore, Chanakya Pandit. Now, interesting that Prabhupada's quoting Chanakya Pandit in 1968. These people have no idea who Chanakya Pandit is. But Prabhupada quotes him often from the very beginning. Chanakya was like the prime minister of India. This is going back about 2,000 years ago. He would counsel the king as to Dharma. And his Chanakya slokas, Prabhupada said that the children should learn them in the school, our young devotee children learn them in the Gurukula. So Chanakya says here that whenever there is fight between husband and wife, it should be neglected. The formula of Chanakya is given like this. He says, when goats are fighting, it is very insignificant. So this is the example that Chanakya gives. So then he goes on explaining how if we see two goats fighting, we don't take it very seriously. Similarly, when husband and wife are fighting, don't take it too seriously. Tomorrow, everything will be fine again. So you can understand, even 2,000 years ago, husbands and wives were fighting, so it's not a new thing. So if you're fighting with your husband or wife, don't worry, it's an ancient process. But we should not take it very seriously. So then he says, whenever there is fight between husband and wife, you should take it like that. Don't take it seriously. But at the modern civilization, the husband and wife quarrel. It is taken so seriously that immediately they go to the court and there is filing of divorce. And the combination, the marriage life dissolved, and both are unhappy. This psychology, it is as it is started. He says, I do not know, but probably it is right that disagreement between husband and wife is due to their personal relationships. That's all. So Prabhupada, again, puts in the modern concept. Of course, Vedic culture, we don't get divorced, but modern age, they take it very seriously, this husband and wife. And we see divorce is very common in the Western world, becoming common in India too now. So then he continues on here. Let's see. Oh, he talks about the Vipra in this verse. Let's see, where's the word Vipra? Yeah, in the last line, Viparate. The Vipra means learned person, one who has studied the Vedas nicely. He's called a Vipra. So he says that there are stages of, he talks about, because we're talking about, what he's talking about here in the verse is that a man will be known as a Brahmana just by wearing a thread. So here he's talking about the fake Brahmanas and the real Brahmanas. He says that by birth, Janmana Jayate Sudra. By birth, we're all born Sudra. Even though we're born in Brahmin family or Kshatriya family, we have the opportunity to become Brahmin, opportunity to become Kshatriya, Vaishya. But he said, without training, if you don't have the training, if you don't follow the regulations, then you stay Sudra. Just like we see so many people are born in high family, but then they don't get training from spiritual master, and there's no samskaras performed beginning from birth and onward, from conception onward, they stay as Sudra. So by birth, everyone is born Sudra, the lower class. And some kara bhave dvija. And if a man and a boy or a child is reformed by education, then gradually he comes to his second birth. So by education, now we're not talking about going to college and getting a degree. And in India and all over the world, this has become the main purpose for bringing our children up to be successful in life. You go get a college degree. He's talking about cultural education, Vedic education, understanding who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. That is real education. So then that is called second birth. So he says here, amongst the higher classes, the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, and the Vaishyas, especially, again, he's talking to these California, San Francisco hippie kids, and he's explaining the whole Vedic divisions of society. Very interesting. Especially amongst the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, the boys were trained very nicely. So by reformation, when the boy is matured at the age of 12 or 13, he goes to the spiritual master. And he goes and he becomes initiated. And he says, just like my students, they also come to me to take initiation. So this is called Dvija, or the second birth. So from the beginning of Krishna conscious movement with Prabhupada, he wanted to create a class of brahmanas. He didn't come just to teach yoga or meditate. You know, there were other swamis, very popular swamis at the time, because they did not give any rules and regulations. They said, do whatever you want. You can eat anything you want and drink anything you want. You know, you just do this little meditation, pay me some money. And this was very popular amongst many of the swamis of the time. But Prabhupada said, if you want to be my student, you have to follow 4 regulative principles. And Prabhupada said, these are the qualifications of a brahmana, that he's not taking intoxication, not drinking, not smoking. He's not having illicit sex, means sex outside of marriage. He's only with his wife. He's not gambling and intoxications and meat eating, no meat eating. He's a vegetarian. Says, if you want to be my student, these are the 4 things. And he said, if I didn't have these regulations, I would have thousands and thousands of disciples. I'd be like all the other swamis, just cheating people. But he said, no, I want them to go back to Godhead. And the only way they're going to go back to Godhead is if they become purified. So from the beginning, and we always had a limited number of people joining our movement. I remember back when I joined in 71, in Washington, D.C., we had 8 people who were full-time devotees in the temple. It was just a small crew of us. And we would go out and do chanting on the streets, and we would sell magazines, Back to Godhead, and we would do college programs. And we'd be introducing Krishna consciousness to so many people. And people would come to the Sunday feasts, but to actually join and surrender, this was a rare thing. Of course, we read in Bhagavad Gita, Manushanam sahasreshu kaschid yatadisidaye yatatam sapisidanam kaschid mam tatfataha. He says that very rare that one comes to me, that Manushanam, in this human life, that we come to Krishna consciousness. So not that we should never expect tons of people to come to Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada said that is a misunderstanding. We should always understand it's a rare thing. Prabhupada would say, I'm selling diamonds. If you're selling diamonds, you won't find many buyers. If you're selling costume jewelry for $3, everybody will buy. But if you're selling one piece of jewelry for $10,000, you won't find many people. So it's like that. We're giving something very rare and not necessarily easily attainable, because one must become purified. So that brings us to the point of Yuga Dharma. So we're in Kali-Yuga. All these bad qualities are there. It sounds like depressing. People are animals almost, losing all their truthfulness, cleanliness, forgiveness, mercy, duration of life, strength, and memory, and religiosity. But there is one wonderful point about Kali-Yuga, and that was what Lord Chaitanya came to teach us, and that is in the line of what Prabhupada is teaching us. Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam, kalo anasteva nasteva nasteva gatiranyata. That Brihat Naradiya Purana, Prabhupada quoted from the very beginning. In fact, we used to even sing this on the streets when we would chant the Maha Mantra. Sometimes we would go in and chant this sloka also. So it means that Nasteva, Nasteva, there's no other way, there's no other way, there's no other way except chanting the names of the Lord. So that is what Prabhupada is introducing to people. He didn't come to give us details of so many Manu Samhita rules and regulations. He said, there are a lot of rules and regulations. He said, if I told you all the rules and regulations, you'd faint. He said that once. He said there are thousands of rules and regulations, do's and don't do's. And he said the essence is chanting. If you chant the names of God, you will become purified. And I'm not charging anything. Prabhupada always said it's free. Everyone else was charging for their process of yoga and meditation. He said, I'm not charging anything. I'm just asking you to try it. Take this chanting of the names of the Lord. And by Prabhupada's purity and Prabhupada's attractiveness, young men and women came to him and said, I want to try that. You look happy, Prabhupada. I want to be happy too. I'm suffering. And this was the whole point, that the material world is suffering. Birth, death, old age, and disease. We're reading, so many millions of life, so many millions of years, and 8,400,000 species of life. We're going up, we're going down. Sometimes we're in the heavens, sometimes we're in the hells, sometimes we're a fish, a dog, a mosquito, a human. Only in human life can you understand God. And that is the important point. The scriptures are for human beings. The animals cannot understand Krishna consciousness. Of course, we can benefit the animals if you can give them prasadam, you can chant the names of God to them, chant Hare Krishna to them. But they will never become liberated in this lifetime, except through some, there's some special stories, of course, but in general, generally they don't jump right out to liberation. It's a long process. So let me read the last verse of this 4, just so we have it. And the 4th verse is, a person's spiritual position will be ascertained merely according to external symbols, and on the same basis, people will change from one spiritual order to the next. A person's property will be seriously questioned if he does not earn a good living, and one who is very clever in juggling words will be considered a learned scholar. So what that means is external symbols. Prabhupada talks about in his talk that people dress up as sannyasis because they're poor and they can't make a living, so they see that the sannyasi is going around always getting food by begging door to door. So he said, I'll put on a sannyasi dress and I'll be able to survive. So he said, this is the Kali-Yuga, that people are dressing as sannyasis, but they're not really sannyasis. They're dressing as brahmanas, and they're wearing the 2, Prabhupada talks about, you can go to the market and buy a sacred thread for 2 cents. He says, but that doesn't mean you're a brahmana. You have to have knowledge, you have to have education. So this is the age of Kali and the symptoms of the Kali-Yuga. Here, just read this last thing. He says here, but actually if we refer to he's talking about yoga and how people, particularly in the West, so many people are teaching yoga, and there's so many yoga studios, yoga's become so popular. He says, but if we actually refer to the standard books of yoga, it is very difficult. Prabhupada said in the 6th chapter, Krishna says, must be in a sacred place. You can't be doing yoga in the city. You have to be in a sacred place. And you have to be secluded, not in a class full of young men and women, mostly women. To be honest, people are doing this yoga for health and exercise. They're not doing it to understand the super soul, to meditate, fix their mind, to control their senses, to become free from material desires. That's not their goal. Their goal is to be healthy, to be flexible, and that's about all. So he says, everyone can manufacture in his own way some cheap thing, and people will like it. So he says, these are the symptoms of this age. So everything is cheap, everything is cheating, nothing is real anymore. But that was the uniqueness of Prabhupada, that he came and he said time and time again, people say, I've done a wonderful thing. They say to Prabhupada, you've done a wonderful thing, Swamiji. You've spread Krishna consciousness. He said, I'm only presenting it without changing it. Krishna says, surrender to me, think of me, become my devotee. Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. He said, this is how I present it. I'm not changing. I'm not talking about something impersonal or some bogus yoga system or trying to make some business out of it. He said, I'm simply wanting people to get the real message as it is. That's why Prabhupada called his Gita as it is. So this was the uniqueness of Prabhupada, and this is why we all joined when, mostly young people join. Prabhupada said once that the bamboo, when it's green, you can bend it, but when it's matured and old, it just breaks. So he says, The young people, they're flexible. They can learn about new things. He said older people are a little more difficult. All of his students were young. When I was in the ashram in New York, we had 100 men, and there was maybe 6 or 7 who were over the age of 25. So this is back in 73, 74. So all young men. Now we've become old, but we started young. And there's still hope. There's still more young people. So many people can join. Prabhupada did not discriminate. He didn't come just to teach a certain class of people. He didn't come here just to look up the Indian people or the Hindu people, because that's easy. He said, I want to preach Krishna consciousness to all people. And when we went to Africa, he said, I want you to preach to the African people. In Africa, there's lots of Indian people doing business. They're easy to preach to. He said, I want you to preach to the African people, teach them Krishna consciousness. So we have Russia, Krishna consciousness. We have Europe, South American Krishna consciousness. We have temples all over the world. That's because Prabhupada had a big vision to make the whole world Krishna conscious. So I want to thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk about the symptoms of the age of Kali. Hare Krishna. So you want to have questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for so nicely summarizing this vast topic of Kali-Yuga and reiterating Srila Prabhupada's words. Thank you very much. Yes, we'll go into questions, but so if anybody has a question, can raise your hand or type in the text box. But before we go into the questions, I'll just like to make some announcements, because this is the time before the class and before we end that we have most of the people on the call. So one is that right after the question and answers, we will read the story of Indira Ekadashi. It is very important and very beneficial to read the story of Ekadashi or hear the story of Ekadashi. So those who would like to can stay on. The other thing is I'd like to announce welcoming of a new family member in our community, Ram Tulsidas and Kalindi Priya Mataji, their baby, whose name today, given the name Dulal Gopal. So he's joined our family, just newborn Vaishnava, and our prayers from all of us to him. I already blessed him to become one of the greatest, one of the powerful preachers in time to come within ISKCON. And Anuttama Prabhuji also, since you're here, in your mind, you could bless this new.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Also,
It's
today,
important that the parents educate their children in Krishna consciousness. That's what will make the children good devotees.
yes. And today is also the birthday of Shilpi. Shilpi is one of our core congregation members. I think she's there, but let us also wish her and many more Krishna conscious years, and that she continue singing for Krishna. She sings with a lot of enthusiasm. So Shilpi, happy birthday to you. And finally, we would also like to continue our prayers for Sulba Mataji, who's still in ICU. She's in a stable state, but what I hear is that for another 3 to 4 days, she will still be in ICU, is under monitor. So please do not stop. Keep her in your prayers when you chant, etc. And then starting Thursday is the World Holy Name Week, and also the starting of Purushottam. So we will be coming up with all the programs that we're going to do for Bergen and encourage everybody to participate. Take advantage of Purushottam. Anything that you do spiritually, hundreds and thousands of times, it's duplicated, the efforts that you put in. So you don't want to miss this special month that is very dear to Lord Hari. So I'll pause here and then we'll open up for questions. Anyone?
Hare Krishna, Babu.
Hare Krishna, Gopal Govind Prabhu. Please, can we see you? Where are you?
Okay. Am I audible, Prabhu?
Yes, you are. Please
Prabhu?
go.
Okay, Hare Krishna. So, Prabhu, I have one comment and one question as well, or rather, like, I don't know, like, related to Prabhuji's pastimes. So, one comment is that his katha was looking like as if you're sitting in that Srimad Bhagavatam re-recited by Sutta Goswami, whereas um, Prabhupada has been uh, the original reciter. So it was very nice how nicely he emphatically every single sentence emphasized on Prabhupada's teachings. I really like it. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. And one question I have is a little bit on the pastime. So you joined Hare Krishna movement at the age of 16, which is really very much interesting that how a young person at that age joins Hare Krishna. So my question is that when you joined there, what keeps you going, and what was your motivation to stick around with Hare Krishna? How did it happen?
Mm-hmm. All right, you ready for that? You can hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, 16 is a young age. My oldest granddaughter is 16 right now, so I'm seeing what 16 is now and again. But Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that the incomplete yogi again takes up the yoga process. He's automatically attracted to it in his next birth. We see that some people just automatically take to Krishna consciousness, and some people you can talk to for 20 years and they just don't get it. So it's all our past karma, our past activities, and ultimately receiving the blessings of the pure devotees. So of course, joining is one thing, continuing with it. We've seen a number of people who have joined Krishna consciousness but gradually fade away. So that is a question of strictly following the rules that the Prabhupada, that the Guru has given us, namely chanting our rounds, following these principles of no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, and no sex outside of marriage. So if we stick to these things, Prabhupada said this will keep us pure. So it's a question of our determination. How much do I want to go back to Godhead? How much do I want to realize Krishna and serve Krishna and ultimately serve my spiritual master? So what keeps us going is one receives happiness by becoming Krishna conscious. It's not that I'm just doing these austerities forever and not tasting anything. One also gets a taste. So one does austerity, but one gets a taste. Just like people say, it's too difficult for me. I can't do this. I can't give up. So many people say, oh, I can't stop eating animals. I can't, I drink alcohol. I smoke cigarettes. It's a question of when you get the higher taste, when you want a higher taste, then you can easily give up all of these things. Just like 16, of course I wasn't addicted to anything particularly, but, as life went on, many people in college, we all know, have so many experiences and all of these things. Fortunately, I missed all that because I was in the ashram. So Krishna saved me from a lot of opportunities for sinful activities. So. Another question?
Rani Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for the wonderful class. So I was just curious to know that since Kali-Yuga itself feels like Naraka, hell, right? So why do we say that, or do souls still go to hell after death? And how will that hell, differentiate from this hell, like Kali-Yuga?
I didn't quite follow all that question. Could you say it again?
Yes. So my question is, Kali-Yuga itself feels like hell, right? That is
Like hell. Okay,
scripture shares.
right.
So do souls still go to hell after death?
Do souls still go to hell after death while they're living in the Kali-Yuga? Is that the
Yes.
question? Sure, there is worse. there's in the fifth canto of the Bhagavatam, hell is described, and it describes all kinds of sufferings based on what activities, sinful activities, one has performed. So, sure, Kali Yuga is suffering, but not nearly as much suffering as what goes on in the lower planets. So, if one is sinful, if one is Prabhupada mentioned abortion, cow killing, and even all of these, breaking these principles that we follow of purity, one must suffer. So one will go into the lower species or to the lower planetary systems. And if you read fifth canto, it describes very clearly all the types of suffering that is there. So hell is not just a made up concept to scare people. Hell is a reality. I mean, there's nice planets and there's middle planets. Earth is considered middle planet, and then there's lower planets. So there's the heavens, the middle, and the lower, depending on your. That's why in Vedic culture, people perform pious activities to get elevation to the heavenly planets, because it's very enjoyable up there. Of course, it's not liberation, and one must ultimately die. But the idea is that the heavenly planets are nice, Brahmaloka is nice, Indraloka is nice, Earth is middle, considered there's some suffering and some happiness here, and the hellish planets are pretty much all suffering. So sure, if one is sinful, one will go further, worse.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So they do not have to suffer in one lifetime. So whatever sins you do before this body dies, like the person dies, you don't have to go through all that, like the results of that in your lifetime.
Well, that is the uniqueness and the mercy of Krishna, that if we take up Krishna consciousness, we can become purified. Prabhupada, just like all of us Western devotees, none of us were born, we weren't born vegetarians, we weren't born in Brahmin families. We had I'd never even heard of Krishna before I met the devotees. What to speak of know anything about the Vedic culture. So, of course, when I was young, I didn't know what was right or wrong, and I did so many things that I know are wrong now. But Krishna, we become purified by chanting Krishna's name, by doing devotional service, and following the instructions of the spiritual master. So, whatever suffering you're destined to do, you can change your karma by becoming Krishna conscious. That's the point. Otherwise, we're stuck in a cycle of suffering if we don't take up Krishna consciousness. That's why the mercy, Prabhupada describes the mercy as one of the qualities of the daya, or mercifulness. Daya is the Sanskrit, one of the items of the 8 items that are diminished in this age. So the spiritual master, he has unlimited mercy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has unlimited mercy for the fallen souls, and that's why they make an effort to come here. Prabhupada was very comfortable in India, in Vrindavan. He was a sannyasi. He was writing his books, but he said, I must go in person to teach them these books, otherwise the message will not get there. So at the age of almost 70, we all know the story, he made the effort to come to the United States and start his movement with great difficulty. That story of 16, some small amount of a few dollars, 16 rupees or something, Prabhupada had in his pocket, because the government would not let you change money to Western money in India. So he couldn't bring any American dollars. And that's how he came. He had one sponsor in Butler, Pennsylvania, Indian man who had married an American lady, Mr. Agarwal. His father had arranged in India for him to sponsor Prabhupada. And, such a great story of coming with great difficulty just because he wanted to give Krishna consciousness to everyone. So if we take it, we get the benefit, and if we don't take it, we're stuck suffering. So that's how life is.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Mm-hmm.
Let Prabhu, you could ask a question.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, very nice and lively lecture. I hope you can hear me all right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Prabhu, I'll start with an observation today. So, my 2-year-old son, he started to say that, he wanted to go to Hare Krishna house. I was actually a little bit surprised in the beginning, but he, kept on insisting, and I was perplexed that, it has been like few months that we physically gathered as group of devotees. Hearing him out, I was almost certain that he was referring to Gopal Prabhu. He's one of our pure and pious devotees who actually, in fact, just asked a question a couple of minutes ago. So I didn't know how to react, so I tried to distract him with toys, with stories, and I also took him for a ride. I spent a few minutes giving him a ride, and when I was about to enter into the house, he reminded me again that you didn't take me to Hare Krishna house. So I finally drove past Gopal Govind's house, and I said, okay, here is the house. Are you happy now? So he gave me a smile, and he was very satisfied. So my observation here is, while we try to reduce and even eliminate our attachments and relationships, so interestingly, our bondage with devotees increases. My question is this attachment with devotees and association good? And how will this attachment culminate? You have a lot of experience, decades of being a devotee, and you have done a lot more than I can probably do. How will this attachment culminate, and will this attachment cause sufferings? Because attachments almost always cause sufferings. Thank you, Prabhu.
So let me just understand your question. We're talking about your attachment to family members?
Attachment to family is natural. Attachment to devotees, who we meet as part of association.
But I mean, that is recommended, that we become attached to devotees and not attached to film stars and politicians, which is very popular. So, yeah, because a devotee, he's only thinking of your welfare. He's not thinking how he can exploit you in some way. And he's the friend, Dinabandhu. Krishna's name is Dinabandhu, devotees' names are Dinabandhu. We're the friend of everyone. So there's no attachment to devotee is recommended. An attachment to material things and to material people is the cause of suffering, but not attachment to devotees. Because devotees can help us. The Shrinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. By hearing and chanting the message of Krishna, where do we hear and chant? We hear it with other devotees. Satsang. We have satsang. We have the association of sat, of truth, to be with devotees. So just like now, we're here to talk about Krishna, not talking about politics or movie stars or Bollywood or anything else. Only Krishna, only Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. This will make us happy. Everything else is temporary. Prabhupada described like a flash of light. This life is over. This time marches on. So, that's very good. Your son is 2 years old. He has a, attachment to Krishna. We see that again and again, even in my children, my grandchildren. They all have attachment to Krishna. you don't take birth by chance. Nothing is by chance. If anyone understands the laws of karma, people are taking birth in families due to their past pious activities, or good families, or bad families due to their impious activities. So, this beauty, wealth, education, these are all pious, from pious activities. And if we're born in a devotee family, we get that opportunity. So, Hare Krishna, thank you.
Yes, two very nice questions by Rani Mataji and Lalit Prabhu. So, Lalit Prabhu, my question is, did you take him into the Krishna house or you just drove him by?
I called Gopal Govind Prabhu. He was probably already in the class. So it was 7 p.m. So I just drove past and came back. He was satisfied just having a glimpse of the house. So he was happy.
Now we have a new name for that house, the Krishna house. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna house, yes.
Anybody else has any question?
So I have a question. So in normal times, you get together, you rent a church building and you have a regular gathering once a week?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah,
On Sunday.
When things are normal.
Yes.
Right now we're Zooming through this video.
And other than Sundays, if it's a big festival, then we also hold those festivals. We pretty much did all the festivals last year. Janmashtami was our first one there. We got about 500 new people to come to attend the Janmashtami festival last year.
Well, now that I had a chance to meet a lot of you, I'll make a point to...
I have a...
What's that? Can you hear me? Yeah. So I was saying that now that I have...
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and hopefully you can hear me, right? I'm saying that when things become normal again, I'll make an effort to come and visit you all. You're not that far away. I'm in Maryland, just near Washington, D.C. So,
and you can stay with us. We'll be happy to host you. So one question I have is that, as you mentioned, Srila Prabhupada made it quite easier, like chanting 16 rounds compared to before it was 64 or 32 and then 16, and then just do the 4 regulative principles, follow that at least, and you should be fine. During those times, if somebody even deviated from that, how forgiving was Prabhupada to, if somebody understood, accepted, and came back and restarted with sincerity, how accepting was Srila Prabhupada to them, and how did they feel?
Well, Prabhupada never, shall we say, removed anyone from Krishna. He never banned anyone, never, shall we say, kicked anyone out, to use a common term. Prabhupada was, sometimes devotees would leave, obviously people leave, and there was one early devotee who left who was very helpful, and Prabhupada wrote him a letter. He said, please forgive me if I've done something wrong, that you've left our association. So the spiritual master is always anxious for his disciples as best he can, and he's forgiving. Devotees do their best. Not everybody is perfect. People have fall downs, but that's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Even if you have a temporary fall down, you're considered rightly situated if you again take up the practice. So Prabhupada was never, of course, Prabhupada would chastise people for just as the teacher, as the spiritual master, but he was never, unforgiving, shall we say, toward a disciple's shortcomings. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other question? So also, compared to the late 60s during the hippie times and all, I mean, now if we compare to those days, although it has gotten worse, but it's not, sometimes we see it's not that bad either. Um, but we still find it difficult to introduce new people, especially uh, the non-Indian or the Western, for us to bring them. Uh, and that, one may say, well, that time was Srila Prabhupada, such a pure devotee, but we still have Prabhupada with us. Prabhupada always said that I'm here in my books, and that's what we're presenting. We're still presenting Prabhupada's books as is. So still, why aren't we able to get those people interested? Our team has been trying hard to promote these programs on social media and to get it outside of the so-called Indian community. Not that the Indian community doesn't need Krishna. We all do, all the souls do, but still we don't kind of get them interested to first bring the horse to the pond. Next is we will to make the horse drink, but even to bring them to the pond has become a difficult task. What do you think we could do or we are doing wrong? And this is not for us, and probably global, that's happening all over North America.
Yeah, it's a current, the way things are. No, it's not just New Jersey, it's all over, like you said. Of course, in Europe, they're very successful. In South America, I've been, all the members are South American. There's not that large of an Indian community in most countries in South America. So the South American people join. And in Russia, of course, we all know that's fantastically doing well. And other European countries I've been to, they're all European mostly involved. Indonesia, I've been there. The Balinese people, they're, of course, they're Hindu by nature, but they're of a different, they have a different culture than Indian culture. But they're joining. And China, of course, is becoming successful now. A lot of people in China. American people, it's, you just have to, have just, like when I came to the temple in 1971, I saw it was all young American boys and girls, or young ladies and young men, not boys and girls, people in their 20s. And I saw this is something interesting that I can, I saw the seriousness of their spirituality. I was personally attracted to renunciation, to a monk type life, wearing robes and shaving head, and all this was fine with me. I was unusual because I joined right away. I just say, okay, I was already a vegetarian, so nobody had to convince me on that. And I had already realized that intoxication wasn't doing me any favors. So I had already given up that. So basically I was already almost a brahmachari before I became a devotee. So I just came and I saw all these nice people and I joined. So of course, nowadays in most of our temples in North America, we are not encouraging ashram life for people. If a kid comes to the temple, if a 16-year-old kid came to our temple today, oh, he'd never get in the door. He'd come to the Sunday feast, but you need a letter from your mother and your father and the police and a lot of, because we've had some experiences over the years with problems, but, say a 25-year-old person comes, a lot of our ashrams our temples don't have facility as a training course to make devotees. Of course, we have our Bhakti Center in New York City, and I think that they do well, and they have the Harinam party going out every day, regularly in Manhattan. So the temples have to have of course, you don't even have a temple, so you're not having anybody living in the ashram. But you're trying to encourage people just to even practice at home. And that's what we all do in all of our temples. That's kind of been the shift to practice Krishna consciousness at home. And it's Manushanam Sahasraju. It's a rare thing. Indian people, it's a little easier. I mean, not that they're going to live in the ashram because they're all married people, and they're doing their business and jobs. Of course, in India, many do join the ashram, but in America, we're not expecting that. But Prabhupada always encouraged, distribute my books. People read his books. They'll understand Krishna consciousness. Personally, I got a magazine. I thought it was wonderful. I went to Georgetown, downtown DC. I met the devotees on the street. They were giving out Simply Wonderfuls, those little sweet balls. So there's one devotee on each corner. So I had a Simply Wonderful in each corner. I went around another one, got a magazine. I read it, and I was at the temple the next week and ready to join up. So as soon as summer vacation came, my 11th grade, I finished, I would stay on the weekends and come on Easter holiday. And when summer vacation came, I moved right in. And then when senior year came, you mentioned how I was in high school. My senior year came, my father said, he was liberal. He said, you can stay at the temple, but you have to finish high school. He said, you have to get a high school degree. You got to at least do that. So I said, all right. So I stayed at the temple and went to high school in DC and finished my year. And after that, I didn't go to college, didn't need to. I was a full-time devotee. But, for many years, I actually moved out of the temple in 85, not 80. I got married in 80. I had another 5 years of doing service as a married person. And in 85, I started a business and, still here. So, but there's no easy question and no easy answer to that question. How do we make more Westerners? Book distribution, Prabhupada is always encouraged. Festivals, Prabhupada is always encouraged. Harinam, Sankirtan, Prabhupada is always encouraged. So all these things, some people see the kirtan and love it and want to know more. Some people get a book and they're inclined intellectually and they read it. A lot of people get books and don't read it, but Krishna's in everyone's heart. Krishna tells them, read the book. So they say, all right, I'll read it. So Krishna does wonderful things from inside, and the spiritual masters and the pure devotees and all the devotees are doing wonderful things from the outside. So this is we have a two-way preaching system here. Krishna inside, devotees outside. So in this way, and people just have to be a little fortunate. Prabhupada said once, I'm making your good fortune, because we said to Prabhupada, well, we're all coming from, Western backgrounds. We're not like brahmanas or previously doing anything spiritual. Prabhupada said, I have made your good fortune just by my mercy to you. So we have to be merciful. Daya is that merciful word to people. People are suffering, that is the whole thing. We sometimes we've been a devotee so long, we forget what suffering is. We think life is okay because I'm a devotee. I don't really have any big problems. Of course, we all have health issues and, these things go on with this body, but people are mentally suffering, physically suffering, and they want an answer. And we have it. So we should never forget that we have the answer, and that people will appreciate it if they have the opportunity to find it from us. They just got to be out there, somehow. I don't know. Your center doesn't do any Harinam, do they? They go out once in a while.
We've done it. Last year we had many. We would go to the park and sit and do kirtans, and we also did many fairs where we would have a book stall.
Okay.
So we were out there.
Okay. Yeah, that's got fairs and things and events and yeah. So
the other point I wanted to make, or actually question, is that I read earlier in your introduction that you went to high school wearing dhoti and kurta, and this is going back so many years. It's unusual. It's almost like an alien in my class. On our call today, we have many youth who are wonderful devotee children, and they're very proud to be Hare Krishna. Most of all of them are chanting, and wonderful kirtaniers actually also, and they hold the beads and they would walk with the beads. They would not feel shy of chanting and all. What takeaway message would you give them to, sometimes even adults, we tend to hide, maybe my tilak or maybe my kantimala or maybe my beads. I want to just carry a clicker in the bus. So what message would you give to our youth that, be proud of? I mean, even the Jews are not shy of who they are. The Muslims.
Yeah, the Buddhists are running around in their robes. The Jews are wearing their yarmulkes and different things. Everybody has their uniform. But of course, you have to understand, back in the early 70s in Krishna conscious movement, there was no wearing of Western clothes. When you became a devotee, it was like hardcore. There was no, they weren't even encouraging people to be congregational members particularly. They encouraged people, come and join us, come and live with us. So I really didn't, there was no choice for me, nor did I particularly mind wearing a dhoti and a shaved head and tilak going to high school. Luckily, nobody ever beat me up or bothered me. In fact, I used to bring lugdus to the school and give them out to friends of mine from the Mahaprasadam, people I met. And I had a group of friends that I made throughout the year when I was there. But I see that my children, my grandchildren, they all went to they went to schools. Some of them go to private schools, some of the grandchildren, but my children went to public schools. But I didn't ask them to wear tilak or wear, robes or anything. That's really not required. Nor did Prabhupada in the beginning. If you see like you were showing the video of Prabhupada arriving in 1970 in California, it's at LA. One of his servants had a suit and tie on. Prabhupada said, you must dress like a gentleman. Prabhupada wanted us to be like gentlemen. He said, we started with robes because Prabhupada wore robes, but Prabhupada said specifically that I never insisted that you wear these things, but Prabhupada was happy that we did. And that's, for the ashram members, that's our uniform, our saris and robes and things like that. So for the students, young people, most important thing is just to avoid bad association. Don't be tempted to do something, non-veg or something else. It's very popular amongst the Indians, not in devotee families, but I let my son or my child, they let them eat what they want. I don't want them to feel odd at school. These are non-devotee Hindus. So they let them go non-veg, even though the parents are vegetarians. But for devotee, it's not hard to be vegetarian. In fact, it's quite popular nowadays. So just avoid bad association, people who are tempting you to sinful activity. Don't, I'll tell you a little story of my granddaughter, 14-year-old. One boy asked her to go to the dance at the school. And she said, "Are you a vegetarian?" He said, "No." He didn't even think about it. "No, I'm not a vegetarian." Why are you asking me that? He said, I don't go out with people who are not vegetarian. Sorry. So then he got, he realized that wasn't going anywhere. So you have to be like that. You have to stick to your principle. Don't compromise. Know what you want to do and be convinced, have conviction that vegetarian diet is my proper diet. Animal killing is terrible. Cow killing is worse. Intoxication is leading you to nowhere. And if you have this in your mind, then you won't be tempted. That it won't please Krishna or the spiritual master if I break these principles. So that's all we ask of our kids. We don't ask them to wear tilak or wear robes nowadays, but be dedicated to your principles. Be convinced and know what you are. So.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Any other question? And also just got the news that there's another addition to our family. Ranjan Prabhu and Shika Mataji. They just had a baby. The Mataji delivered a baby boy today, and don't know the name yet, but in next coming days we will. So two more Vaishnavas joining our Sankirtan party.
So how many people, what is your congregation size there?
On a Sunday, usually we would get on an average 75 people, 75 people on a Sunday, sometimes more, sometimes less. Yeah. So today we have approximately 36 logins. Some have 2 logins, 2 people in a call, some 3, some 1. So on an average, about 75 people in the call as well.
Do you have plans to purchase a building for regular services?
At the moment, we're just focusing on increasing, spreading the word, increasing our congregation size. And the church we're in are very welcoming. And the space is all right. So.
Yeah, it works. Well, that's the Nam Hata program. That's the most important, spreading the word and, dealing with each family, seeing people, meeting people in their homes. And
other